The other chair broke or something? I don't know. It just wasn't here one day. This is like CSI LCCC or something. I don't know why it bothers me, but I have to admit it kind of does. And I won't say bother me. I'm just curious because, I mean, chairs just don't disappear. What does disappear are markers. Now, I don't use a marker in this class, but like almost all the time when I go into a classroom, the markers are in horrible condition. And I will bring a marker in, and the next class, the markers will still be in horrible condition. And it's like you think between Monday and Wednesday or Tuesday and Thursday, like the marker would still be good. And you can tell it is the end of the semester, right? Oh my goodness, really? Yeah. Wow. So that's how it's going to be, huh? All right, we were talking about HTML tables, and we're going to wrap those up today. We're going to talk about a few things that you can do with them, and going to review what we did last time. The other thing I would like to talk about today is publishing your website. In other words, when you're done with your website and you've gotten it to work, what do you do then? And so we should have time to talk about that today. Not today, then Thursday. So, this is what we mean by a table in HTML. And I know you can't see, so bear with me for a second. There. A table is something like an Excel worksheet, whereas you have rows and columns of data. All right? And we went over the exercise last time of trying to get this sort of layout without using a table, and it didn't work. It didn't work because of the way that browsers treat white space. In other words, if I space out fields so I get the code looking like it lines up, it won't line up on the browser because the browser will just display everything as one line. So you needed to define tables explicitly so that things line up in rows and columns. Now, a reminder that you only use tables to show this kind of data. You don't use tables to try to achieve a layout on a web page. And we talked about that briefly. And if you didn't understand it or didn't follow what I was talking about or have no experience doing it that way, fine. Forget I said anything. I'll use the Jedi mind trick. Here, I'm going to turn the camera on. You heard nothing about using tables for layouts. Was that convincing? Not really. Yeah, you already forgot. There, see, there you go. All right. But if you have done web design like years ago, that's how people did it. And again, there was a good reason at the time for doing it. All right. But now there are, now that CSS has matured and browsers support CSS better, using CSS is a better way to do it. So, tables consist of rows and columns of data. The four main tags associated with tables are the table tag itself, the TR tag, then TH and TD tags. So if we're going to look at the code for this, I didn't want to do that. If we're going to look at the code for this, we'll see that we have one table tag that goes around the entire table. A table contains rows, so we then have one TR for every row. Each row consists of THs or TDs. THs stand for table header. In other words, they're not data itself, they're headers. They're explaining to you what that column means. Usually, this would be the first row of the table. All right. Again, I hesitate to say always because, you know, there's going to be weird cases and exceptions. But for the most part, that's going to be the first row of the table is going to have your THs in it. And the rest of the rows are going to have TDs in it. And TD stands for table data. Now, by default, THs are bold and centered, where TDs are left aligned and not bold. However, remember, we can change anything about the appearance of things simply by changing the CSS. So in this case, I wanted the TDs to also be center aligned, so I put center align, text align center for that. So that way I got those to be centered. The one thing that you do not do ever, ever, ever is put something in a particular HTML tag because you want it to look a certain way. So for example, if I wanted my headers to be left aligned and not bold, I would not put them in TD tags because, well, that's by default how TDs look. No, that's lying to your browser. Don't lie to the browser. What you would do instead is you'd put them in THs because that's what they are. They're table headers. But then you would use CSS to say text align left, font weight normal, or whatever the CSS would be for that. All right? Now again, the nice thing about tables is it's not going to cut off any data. The browser does things automatically, which is good. And so in other words, if you don't put any sizing on a table, it makes the table cells and it makes the table itself as big as it needs to be. But then you can go and customize that simply by putting in like a width, for example, here. Now just to review, a width of 80% means that the table is going to take up 80% of the available space. Now, the tricky part sometimes is knowing what the available space is. And what I mean when I say the available space is, in this case, because the table is in the body of the page, the available space is the entire width of the web page. So the table is going to be 80% of the entire web page. All right? Now, if I did something like this, let's say I put the table in an article, and I said that the article had a width of 70%, then that 80% means 80% of the 70%. So you always look at what contains a tag when you're doing percentages. All right? So if the table is in the body, then 80% means 80% of the entire web page. If the table is in another tag, then it's going to be 80% of however wide that tag is. And in this case, I put it in an article. I made the article 80%, and then we can see that the table itself, this is an old version of IE that doesn't know what an article is. Notice the table is narrower now because the article, and again, takes up 70%, and the table takes up 80% of that 70%. So it's roughly 56% of the entire page. Now, one thing that's useful in debugging CSS, if things don't show up the way that you expect them to, one thing that's very useful is to go ahead and either put a border around elements or give them a background color. And I usually give them background colors that really stand out. So I'm not going for a nice looking web page. I'm going for colors that are really going to jump out at me. So if I was not sure, for example, why the table was this wide, I might go in and put the background color of the article as pink and the background color of the table as orange. And then I can very vividly see, well, the article is that wide, the table is that wide. So that's something that's very useful in debugging CSS, because sometimes you look at something and you're not really sure why something is positioned the way that it is, or why something has the size that it does, or something along those lines. And when you run into an instance of that, one of the best things that you can do to troubleshoot it is to temporarily give those colors. All right? And again, I'm not going to leave it like that. You can go back and delete those once that you've done your troubleshooting. The other thing that is useful, remember, to do is to run your CSS code through the validator. And what do I mean by the validator? I mean, if you go to W3 Schools, I'm sorry, not W3 Schools, W3C.org, which is the organization that develops these web standards. They're the folks that invented the language of HTML and CSS and all that. Along the side here, there's a CSS Validator, and you can copy and paste your CSS in here, and it will tell you if it's correct or not. Congratulations, no errors found. Yay. So if I was doing something and let's say I got careless and I typed it like that, made a small typo. Or, what a good one is? Usually I have like 5 students do this every semester. They'll type in background instead of background. Just, they're in a hurry and they typo. And they look at this and they say, why isn't the table gray? Well, if you copy and paste this code into the validator, it will go and it will tell you, sorry, and it's even polite about it. It doesn't yell at you. It doesn't say, hey, learn how to spell or something like that. Very nicely says, sorry, we found the following errors. And background, and it says property background doesn't exist. Now, it takes a little while for you to sort of get on the same wavelength as a validator, because the validator does give you errors, but sometimes it gives you errors in a way that it's not 100% clear what it means. So sometimes you have to read between the lines. In this case, it's pretty obvious. Background doesn't exist. What do you mean background doesn't exist? Oh, background. And then you can go in and you can correct it. And there, my table's gray. What does border collapse do? This is kind of a goofy thing, and this is kind of a leftover from the old way that tables were, but if you do not have border collapse in there, then it leaves a tiny little gap between the table cells. So notice like right there, right there, right there. You probably can see that. Let's make it bigger. There's a tiny gap between the table cells. All right? Maybe you like that. I don't know. That's probably just a personal preference. I can't stand when they do that. All right. So I almost always put the border collapse property on it, so that I don't get the little gap between the table cells. So now there's a line between that. What are some other things that we could do styling-wise that might help the way this table looks? I'm going to get it back to being 80% of the screen. What are some other things that we could do style-wise to make this table easier to read, more attractive, and so on? Any thoughts? Put what? Put the grid lines in. Now, how would we do that? Okay. And what would we do? The THs. Okay. And how would we do that? We could say, right now we have a border bottom, which puts the border just going along the bottom. But if I change that to simply border, that would do the border in all four directions. All right. If I also wanted it around the data, I could do the same thing on the data. So I have the grid lines around that. And again, you know, that makes it, can make it easy to read. One thing I could do, what could I do to make the headers stand out a little bit more? Put a different color around it, sure. So maybe I could put on the THs, I could put a background color. And we'll spell background right. Of yellow, let's say, or orange, or whatever. All right, makes it stand out. I could certainly make the text bigger. Really, anything that we've done before relating to CSS we can do here. All right, so I won't go over all of it, but just in general. All right. Couple of other things. All right. You can put a caption on a table. And that's a good idea to do, because if you look at this, well, I don't know. It's not immediately apparent what that means, right? We know because we talked about this, and I'm talking about the average temperature in those cities for those months. All right? But it's not obvious. Is that the average high temperature? Is that the average low temperature? Is that the amount of snow that it gets? Is that the amount of rain that it gets? Whatever. It might be hard to tell. So what I could do is I can put a caption on it. And so I can go in, and the caption has to be the first line after the table tag. By default, it makes the caption centered and looking like that. Now, I can change that, of course, by CSS. I can do anything that I've done with any other CSS. So I could go in, I could put the caption text align left, font size 1.3 em. Let's give it a background even. And we have that. Now here's a question, and this is a subtle question, but let's see if we can understand why I'm saying this. I could put a caption using the caption tag like this. I could also put a caption like this. I could kind of put a caption like this. I could put above the table, I could put, for example, an H1. Something like that. But I would say putting a caption is a better way to do it. Why is putting a caption better than simply putting a header immediately above the table? Yes?
For one, it kind of makes it smaller, and it's kind of like it aligns with the table cells rows. Aligns it better, I guess.
Okay. Of all the things that you said, I like the last thing best. It defines it better. All right? In other words, this isn't just any ordinary heading. This is the caption for that table. This is associated with that table. Therefore, it belongs associated with this table. So the caption tag explicitly makes it part of the table. Yes?
Would you also be able to kind of like, I see this kind of sometimes like in Microsoft Word, you actually like flip it, I think, 90 degrees and align it to the left. So it's kind of like parallel.
Right. Oh, that's a good question. So in other words, what you're saying is kind of like this, if I'm understanding you. So like you would want it to say temperature and then have the tables like this.
Yeah. How would you do that?
Are there any other questions? Whoa, what did I do? Give me a second. I think I hit the wrong buttons or something. Hi, my control panel is showing, is this a distance learning class, yes or no? Okay. And then what? Okay. Let me go and do that. I don't know if the phone reaches, so hold on. Yeah, really. They asked me what it's doing, but they are actually able to control it themselves, so they're probably just going ahead and doing. They're probably saying, this guy doesn't know what he's doing. We're just going to take matters in our own hand.
They even turned out the spotlight.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it looks like it's coming, and then they hung up on me.
They decided you needed a tan.
Yeah, really. Yeah. Well, you hung up on me, first of all. That's okay. I'm just teasing. It is coming back on, and the lights are on, as though you're going to start interrogating me. Yeah. Well, I need to record the rest of the lecture. Because my guess is that it stopped recording. Oh, okay. All right, great. sounds good. All right, bye-bye. Oh, it's great. The people at home get to hear all this too, because it's continuing recording even though the panel went off. Great. This is like the worst case scenario, because it's a distraction, the recording cut off, yet it's not funny enough to go viral, right? I mean, it's not like I, boom, hit my head, oh, and started, knock myself out or something like that. All right, at any rate, the lengths that I go to avoid answering a question that I'm not sure of the answer of. Yeah. So the question was, to rephrase, how could I get a header to go like this? That is a darn good question. I think I know how to do part of it. I think I can rotate the text.
Yeah, just in general, any text, even headers, captions.
Yeah. Let's see if we can find out. Okay, that is not the right web page. That's not the right web page. I say, how is it I go to this page 1,000 times per semester, and today I cannot remember the URL? All right. Okay, learn HTML, CSS, CSS text formatting, text color, text transformation. No. Letter spacing, line height, text direction, no. Yeah, there absolutely is. I just unfortunately cannot remember it off the top of my head. Well, let's Google it. CSS text rotate. Text rotation, CSS tricks. Blog post about sideways headers. What? CSS transform property. It was a transform property. So there they have it rotated. Why did they rotate it 7 degrees? But I would think we would want it rotated
Negative
90 degrees. I'm thinking negative 90 would rotate it backwards, so it would be facing the wrong way. So let's try it. Rotate 90. Let's try 90. Am I using Internet Explorer? Okay, good. Let's get rid of this. Yeah, demo for vertical text. Yeah, it's rotate. Oh, okay. So let's try this. Let's put this in our code. All right. What does a dot in front of that mean? The dot in front of the CSS rule. Well, it's a class. What that means is that's not a specific HTML tag. There's no HTML tag called vertical text. It's a class. So anything that I assign the class of vertical text to will be vertical. So I can go and assign this and say class equals vertical text. And that almost did it. Almost did it. All right? So I'm encouraged. Let's go and let's give it a width and a height. Width. Now I'm like really confused because if you rotate it, which is the width and which is the height? I'm thinking the width is.
Would it be the same?
Yeah, I think it's the same.
I think the browser looks at it that way.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So the width. Let's try this. It's there. I remove the yellow. Yeah. Okay.
It has to do with the caption.
Yeah, it's the text is there.
Yeah, text align left.
Yeah, let's get rid of that. Okay, that didn't that. So I want that back in. All right. Margin.
Is it the table width?
That's a darn. If you have not figured it out already, I won't say I'm clueless, but I have never done this. That's a better way to say it. I've never done this because that doesn't mean I'm clueless, but that means that it's not. I am not acting like I'm dumb to like pretend like I'm teaching and discovering this along with you. I am actually discovering this along with you. There we go. Margin. All right, that scooted it over. So now what I need to do maybe is put a margin. Oh, let's try this. Let's put the margin on the table. Oh, all right. So now let's do this. Let's make the height match the height, or let's make the height of the table match the width of the caption. Almost. Height of the table. I don't like What don't I like about this? And I think this is what you had asked for, and I think you were right, whoever said rotate it negative 90 degrees. I was thinking wrong. I was thinking that it would rotate it the opposite. It's rotating it this way. So if it starts this way, it goes like that, then the start of the word will be on the top. If you wanted to start the word on the bottom, you would rotate it negative 90 degrees. Or not. Oh, then I would do the axis of rotation left bottom. Almost, we're getting there. Right top. Yeah, right. It's just.
It's like random location.
Yeah. What was the closest one to being correct?
Left bottom.
Left bottom. We'll talk about what this means, because interestingly enough, I was talking about this with my animation class, with my multimedia class. We were talking about how to animate a car to make it look like it turns a corner. All right, because a car, when it turns, it doesn't turn like there's a pole in the middle of it. It doesn't like go and then go. The front part of the car actually does the turning, right? And it turns about like the middle of the front axle is where it would actually do the turning. All right. I am going to claim teachers' privileges at this point and say I took you this far.
Maybe go back to left top and put the margin back up there. And put the margin back up in the table.
Okay, getting warmer. You know, the funny thing is, probably if I just Google the right search terms, there we go. If you want it different than this, you can perfect it on your own. I had a teacher that did that if you asked a question and you annoyed him, he'd that sounds like a great homework problem. Figure it out and tell me next class for 20 points. It's like, I'm not sure if that's horrible teaching or brilliant teaching. You know, it does encourage a sense of discovery, but I have a feeling he just didn't want to be bothered by the questions. All right. But in a nutshell, that does it. And again, I'm joking about this a little bit, but it is true that, you know, no matter how long you've been doing this, you're not going to know everything about CSS. So having a basic understanding of the kind of things that you can do and knowing where to look is valuable. The particular issue that I was struggling with here, and again, I'm just trying to do this off the top of my head. If I were to sit down and think about it, my guess is that it would become clear, is when you rotate something, the question is where are you rotating it from? So, for example, if I were to rotate this sheet of paper, if I were to rotate it around the center, it would rotate like this. If I would rotate it from a corner, it would rotate like this. So it depends where you're rotating it from. So in this case, if we're rotating the text 90 degrees, and we did it from the left center, it would put it like this. The left top, it would put it like this, and that's why when we rotate it, it's off the page when we use the left top. If we did the left bottom, it's going to be below the page. So we want to use, if we use the right top and rotate it, that's why it puts it up there. If we use the right bottom and rotate it, that's why it puts it there. So that in combination with the margins appears the seemingly random nature of where it's positioning these things. All right. So let's try to think this through. Now it's becoming to be a point of pride. I don't want to be defeated by this question. All right. So I have temperature. And I want to rotate it this way. So I don't want to rotate it 90 degrees. I want to rotate it negative 90 degrees. So let's start by doing that. And I'm going to get rid of the margin and everything.
Background color, you'd probably be able to see the space.
And that's an excellent idea. So now I'm rotating it negative 90 degrees. So it's up there, right? Because you can't see? Good. It's up there. Why? Because from the left top, I rotated it negative 90 degrees. So that puts it up there, like that. Because I was like this, and I rotated it negative 90 degrees from the left top.
Maybe use relative positioning or absolute positioning.
So now I'm going to rotate it from the left bottom, and we'll see. Yeah, I want to get it oriented basically in the right spot, and then I'm going to worry about moving it closer and farther to the heading. So I'm going to do, or to the table itself. So I'll use left bottom. That does not make sense to me. Because it's up there. Okay, how about we do admit defeat?
Well, what's the number after? At what number letter it's going off of? Or
Is what?
left bottom 0.
Oh, what's the number after? That's a good question.
Is that
Yeah, actually that does kind of look good, except it's... Transform origin. Refer to the size of the box. Huh?
so 0 is 50%?
50 initial value. X offset, Y offset.
It's taking almost the position of that position
That
relative.
pixel that you're picking.
Yeah, position relative as well, like left.
Rotate 30. Rotate 30, 0, 0. I like this one. It just disappears. Oh, wow, we can even slant it.
That's where it's point.
Okay, rotate negative 40 degrees. Transform origin. I'm going to get rid of the 0 and see what happens. My guess is that nothing will happen. Sure enough, nothing was happening. The first time I've been right today. Okay, we'll leave it like this and we'll revisit this next time because our time is done. So next time we'll spend some time talking about wrapping up tables because there's a couple more things to talk about. We'll talk about making your website go live, and we'll talk about JavaScript. If anyone wants to play around with this at least gives you the start for doing that. All right, and all right, we'll see you up in lab. One of the things, by the way, just to close up, one of the things how do I want to say this? One of the things to keep in mind is that I'm not saying you can do anything with CSS, but you can do a lot of things with CSS. So if your question is, can I do this? And it seems like a reasonable thing to do, start with the assumption that you probably can, and then just look for the properties that do that. So you know how CSS works with selectors and properties and values. You know the kinds of things that you can do with it, and then just look for that. And no one expects you to have all of this memorized, and you can just look up the pieces of it that you don't know. All right, we'll see you up in lab.
Sometimes I find that really funny. You can actually sometimes use HTML or CSS to kind of get what you need to get, something basic-wise, and then you can actually use JavaScript in the same way to kind of call for the same function.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Absolutely.
yeah.
When in doubt, generally speaking, the CSS and HTML approach is generally better, and then use JavaScript just for the things that you absolutely need it for. But sometimes yeah, you can use JavaScript to do that, do equivalent sorts of things.
Like I actually ran into a situation where sometimes you, like scrolling wise, even you can do that like in CSS
Mhm.
and JavaScript. You can pretty much do the same thing, but with JavaScript, you just add a little bit more functions to the CSS. CSS can only do so much to a certain point.
Exactly. With JavaScript, you have complete control over things, or I won't say complete control, but you have a greater degree of control. You know, CSS is going to let you do the things that it lets you do, whereas with JavaScript, it may take more work, but you can get it to do pretty much exactly what it is that you want it to do.
By the way, I ended up trying that exam, the PHP
Mhm.
7,
Mhm.
with that MySQLi
Mhm.